What's going on, guys? It's John. So I've been making a lot of videos that feature the Line 6 POD HD500x, and a couple videos ago I tried out the Line 6 Helix Native software for the very first time, and some viewers were commenting and they were talking about the possibility of using the 500x as a MIDI controller to control the Helix Native software. So in a way, you could use your 500x as if it was a Helix. Now, I thought that was a pretty cool idea. So in this video, we're gonna try it out. So let's do it. Okay, so in front of me is my 500x. And in theory, this should be able to work with other pedal boards that are MIDI capable, or really any other MIDI controller. However, I've only tried this out on the 500x, so your results may vary. Now, I'm powered up here, and I've connected a USB cable from my 500x to the computer. Now keep in mind, the USB port on the 500x only transmits audio signal, so it does not power the device and it does not transmit MIDI. So in order to transmit MIDI signals, we need like a dedicated MIDI cable, and for this I'm going to use this guy. This is an M Audio MIDI Sport Uno, and on one end it has our MIDI in and out cables, and then on the other end it has USB. So this is a really handy way to be able to connect a MIDI device to your computer. For this video, I'm only concerned with the MIDI out, so I'm going to use the end that says to MIDI out. Then the USB end just goes to the computer. I also have a new tone pulled up on the 500x, so no effects, no amp models. I just want the dry guitar signal to pass through the 500x into the Helix Native software. There is one small catch though, and that is the 500x is going to output the audio from the DAW, but it's also going to output your dry guitar signal. And as far as I can tell, there's no way to mute your dry guitar signal. Now, this might not be that big of a deal depending on how many effects you have running. You may be able to cover your dry guitar signal, but it will be there, so just keep that in mind. The DAW that I'm using is Ableton Live. On Line 6's website, they have like a support section that talks about how to get everything set up with some of the more common DAWs. I'll put a link for it in the description, so you can follow that if you're using something else, but I'll show you what I do with Ableton. So I'm going to go into my preferences. This is always in the way. And I'm going to go to audio. I'm going to go for the audio input device, set it for the 500x, so it receives audio from the 500x. And then for the output, also 500x. So it's going to receive the dry guitar signal. It's going to run it through the Helix Native software and then run it back to the 500x so that it can be sent through the outputs. So it could either go into a guitar amplifier or into like a mixer or PA or whatever. Then in the MIDI section, I'm going to make sure that under my MIDI ports that the input for the USB Uno MIDI interface, I need the track to be on and I need remote to be on. And then I believe that's all I need to worry about there. In Ableton, I have two tracks. I have a MIDI track and an audio track. On the audio track, I already have the Helix Native plugin dropped in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over here to the MIDI track. I'm going to say MIDI from the MIDI interface. Just going to monitor it, and then MIDI to, I'm going to route it to my audio track. So what this is going to do is it's going to collect the MIDI inputs from the 500x, and then it's going to send it to the Helix Native plugin. For the audio track, all I got to do is just turn monitoring on and then make sure that both tracks are enabled. Now on the 500x, I've pulled up a new tone, so I don't have any effects, don't have any amp models. I just want the pure dry guitar signal to pass through the 500x into the Helix Native software. At this point, the 500x is not going to send any MIDI data, so we need to enable that. So if we hold down the move button, it's going to bring up our MIDI assign menu. And so as you can see, we have all the foot switches, we have our expression pedal, and what we can do is if we turn this first knob here, we have now enabled MIDI for foot switch 1. And you can see we have a few different options. So the number 2 knob is going to select what type of MIDI message we send. As far as I can tell, the CC toggle is the only MIDI message that the Helix Native will MIDI learn. So we'll just leave it there. Then the CC number This is going to differentiate each button from another. So each button has to have a unique CC number. One thing though is that the Helix Native software has specific CC numbers that it reserves just to work with like the Helix pedal board and the other Helix effect pedals. So sometimes it's going to give us an error, as you'll see, and so we just have to keep scrolling through different CC numbers until we find ones that work. So you'll just kind of see how this goes. So right now, foot switch 1 is enabled with MIDI CC number 1. So if I come over here to the Helix Native software, let's just choose this distortion pedal. I just have this first preset pulled up. What preset you use doesn't matter. It's going to be the same for anything. So I'm just going to select an effect. I'm going to come here to the Automation Controller Assign tab. And this first dropdown is going to give us the parameters that we can assign MIDI to. So let's just do the bypass. This is going to be our on-off switch. And if we click this brain over here, this is going to enable MIDI learn. So right now, the Helix Native software is going to expect some kind of MIDI input. And the first MIDI input it gets, it's going to assign the bypass to that input. So if I just hit foot switch 1, okay, and it's going to tell us incoming MIDI CC1 is reserved for use with Helix hardware. So we can't use that one. So if I turn the number 3 knob, let's try number 2. Just going to click that away. Let's try it again. Oh, we get the error. Let's try 3. Again, we get an error. 4. Okay, 4 worked. Sometimes you have to click this a couple times. The CC toggle means that when we click it once, the foot switch is turns on. When we click it again, the foot switch turns off. So sometimes you have to click it a couple times to make it work. As soon as it MIDI learns, it turns off the brain. So now if I click foot switch 4, we can see the distortion pedal turns on. Click it again, it turns off. Okay, so it worked. Now let's try the same thing. Let's try to MIDI learn the modulation effect here. So let's go back to our 500X. Let's scroll to foot switch 2. Do the same deal. We'll click it 1. MIDI is enabled on foot switch 2. And where did I leave off? 4. So let's try. Let's just try 5 and see if this works. So click the brain, MIDI learn. Don't click anything other than the foot switch that you want to assign. Click it. Oh, okay, and that worked. So that one is CC5. MIDI learn is turned off. So if I click it, we can see it's off, on, off, on. And there you go. So you just repeat the same thing going through any of the effects that you want to assign a foot switch to. So we know how to assign the foot switches, but what if we want to assign a parameter to an expression pedal? Let's see how we do that. So let's go over to our 500X. Currently, my expression pedal is set for expression pedal 2. So we just scroll all the way to expression pedal 2. Do the same deal as before, number 1 knob, 1 click. And things look a little bit different. CC number, now it's the number 2 knob. Let's turn it to 6. I think that's about where I left off. And we'll come up to the Helix Native software. Let's select the volume pedal effect. And we need to change the parameter to position. And then we need to go to control, then MIDI learn. And all I'm going to do is just move the expression pedal a little bit, just so it sends a MIDI signal. And there it goes. It's learned it. If we wanted to adjust the minimum and maximum amounts of that pedal, we can use these sliders here. So let's say that we wanted the maximum not to be 100 but only 50 or something like that. We could do that there. I know we've covered a lot of steps in this video, but one tip for you would be to take a moment and go through and find MIDI CC numbers that work for every foot switch on the 500X. Get them all assigned with an individual MIDI CC number, and once you do that, save that preset on the 500X. Maybe name it like MIDI template or Helix Native template, and then you can just reuse that same 500X preset with each new preset that you make in the Helix Native software. You will need to MIDI learn, all the effects that you put into each new Helix Native preset, but you don't have to go through and refine CC numbers each and every time. You can just reuse the same MIDI template on the 500X. So that should save you a little bit of time. Alright guys, that's the basics of MIDI mapping the 500X to the Helix Native software. Let me know in the comments if you thought that this was a cool idea or not. I think it's kind of cool. I think it's like a nice way to be able to reuse some hardware that you might already have at home. If you found this video interesting or informative in any way, please hit that like button. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet, and I'll catch you in that next video. So until then, see you later.